Hey, I'm Blane Chocklett. I'm here at the Michigan Fly Fishing Show. I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the musky Esox rod that I helped design with TFO. This rod in particular, for me, I like to chase big fish, but a lot of times that requires big flies. And I was able to work with them on this big concept for me, which was this grip composition. So we took away natural cork here and use this composite cork, and if you look, you have two different grips in one. You also have an extended butt section. This extended butt section allows you to do a couple things when we are casting and fishing to musky or big predatory fish with teeth like pike. What I'm able to do with this, and I'm going to take this rod apart to show you. You're much stronger being able to pull a fly, especially a big fly, a fly that might be 10 or 12 inches long through the air. So being able to pin this rod up against your forearm, pulling that fly through the air on the back cast, reduces all the stress on your joints, your wrist, your elbow, and your shoulder, because everything is absorbed in a cast and being pulled just like this, back and forth. So coming back, it extends out, and by extending your arm out, what that does is that absorbs that shock or kickover from that large fly when it uncoils at the end. So if you cast normal like this, what happens with that kickover, it's absorbed through the rod and you feel it in your wrist. So by pulling it through the air and extending your arm, you're reducing that shock of that kickover with the fly. Also, the other reason this is extended out is we do a lot of figure 8 movements with this rod. So I'll hold it with my non-casting arm, and we do what we call stirring the pot, which you're able to manipulate the fly around the boat in a figure 8 movement or a big oval to try to induce a strike from a muskie. But this rod is just not a rod for muskies. In my opinion, this rod is really well equipped to be casting big flies to big striped bass on the East Coast, throwing big bunker flies, using this rod down in Guyana for arapaima, using this rod down in Brazil, which I just got back from a trip, casting big flies to peacock bass. This rod, it may be called Esox, but it's a big fly rod. And I highly recommend it. I think it's got all the components necessary for an enjoyable day on the water. Repetitive casting with these big flies, and the more progressive fast action rod that this is, instead of super fast, it's more progressive fast, which also helps absorb and allow us to feel these big flies, bend these things, and catapult these things out. I think faster action rods, what happens on a super fast action rod throughout the day is the faster the rod is, the more recoil you feel throughout the day, and what that'll do is it will also cause injury, not necessarily injury, but pain. So I think having a more progressive fast action rod with big flies helps absorb some of that shock. So I would always, if you were going to look, whether you buy one of these rods or some other company's rods, I would look more at a progressive fast than super fast for casting big flies.
Do you think that it's primarily color choice or changing through color patterns every 15 minutes?
I personally think, one, there's two ways of looking at it. For me, coming back from a beginner in fly fishing and learning based on nymph fishing for trout, mayflies, what I think, first off, movement gets the predatory fish to your offering. If they're not eating it, I start looking at ambient light, what are the conditions. Usually bright days, like they say, bright days, bright flies, but in my opinion, I think it's more movement, and then is it realistic enough? You know, super clear water, the longer the fish has to look at the fly, the more time they have to decide is it food or not. So I think if you get fish that are coming in and not eating, I would look at it, is it look natural enough to that fish? And that's why in my game changer styles, I have synthetic versions and I have impressionistic natural material versions. And I think the movement, and I use the natural materials a lot of times, which I call impressionistic flies. I use those when I need to get the fly down quicker, or if I need to be moving that fly faster, because the feathered changers in my mind move extremely well, but they don't look exactly like the real thing. What I think what will end up happening is if I go to some of these synthetic flies where I can color them up to match whatever type of bait. And this one doesn't necessarily match anything in particular, but I wanted to show this because and we caught a lot of peacock bass in the Amazon on this because this was a color pattern that was recommended as a baby peacock bass.
Sure.
So all these colors were to imitate that. So, but you can't achieve that same natural three-dimensional look using feathers and hair. You can get swimming action, but you're not going to get that realism. And that's where I go first. I think the movement of that fly gets that fish to it. And if they're turning off at the last second, it's usually saying, just like a brown trout in a slow-moving body of water on a mayfly. They come up to it,
attention.
profile silhouette, they're looking at it, looking at it, looking at it. Is it the color that I usually eat? Is it the exact size that I normally eat? And if it's not, they turn away. Same deal.
And as a guide, my go-to, I love white because I can see white and the client can see white across the water.
Yep. And a lot of what fish see is the belly, so they
profile.
see white. Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm an olive or black.
Yeah. Natural. So that's going contrast versus natural. So a lot of times fish are just, depending on where they attack it from, all they may see is profile from shadows.
Right.
Other times they may be at an angle where they're looking into the sun or out of the sun where they're going to see color better. And then that's where sometimes it's going to make a difference if the natural olives and stuff like that come into play.
Gotcha.
So ambient light, color, all that stuff comes into play with big predatory fish, but I think the most important part is movement.